Welcome to our videos. This is number 4 in a series of 10 parts on the subject of self-empowerment. So today we're going to talk about critical thinking. Now, you may have an idea of what critical thinking is. You may, if you're lucky, have learned this in school. At least it used to be taught to some degree, especially in the science classes, and sometimes in social studies, history, although most of that, as you might already know, is propaganda, because history is written by the victors of war. Very few societies have any true and lasting record of those who are defeated in battle. As the statement goes, dead men tell no tales. So you're going to get a fabricated, propagandized version of reality in your history books and in your social studies courses in school. So probably science is the one area where you might get critical thinking. Maybe you're fortunate enough to have a political science class by someone who's an actual thinker and not just trying to indoctrinate you into a particular way of thinking when it comes to political viewpoints, which candidates are best, which party is best, which philosophy is best. Oh, we love capitalism, we hate socialism, or the other way around. So, what are the elements of critical thinking, and why is critical thinking important to self-empowerment? Well, if you're not able to think critically, you're not going to make wise choices based on your true inner guidance. You're going to have what has often been called a knee-jerk reaction, a reactionary stance to things that disagree with your worldview, that disagree with your belief systems, and you're going to do what so many human beings do when they are confronted with their own negative belief systems. They shut down, they put up defenses, they argue for their point of view, even if it is clearly not serving them. It's called arguing for your weakness in psychology. So even though some part of you knows that you have a flawed belief system, you have a flawed viewpoint of reality, one that is not serving you, even so, the tendency is to want to cling to that belief system, to cling to that point of view. Let's use an extreme example first of all. So if you're using critical thinking and somebody comes up to you and says the world is flat. Now we're using an extreme example, but it's not that extreme because there is a flat earth society. And if you go to enough websites, you're going to find some flat earthers, people who are absolutely convinced that the earth is flat. They may even try to portray some science that backs up their claim that the earth is flat. Of course, it's going to be flawed science, we already know that, but to them, they may be so convinced the earth is flat that they manage to mold their science to fit their presumption. And this, of course, is pseudoscience or fake science, when you already have a made-up conclusion about reality and you're trying to get your mathematics and your logic to fit your made-up view of reality. You're trying to put a square peg into a round hole, and when it doesn't want to go, you pound it in and force it to fit. There's a lot of scientists who've done this in their research, even to the point of making up mathematical statements that actually don't make much logical sense in order to try and force the numbers to account for what they are convinced is true. It's like that magician who offered $1 million if anybody could prove that psychic phenomena was real, and probably will never ever pay the money because he's so convinced that psychic phenomena is not real that even if someone were to blatantly demonstrate it right in front of him, he wouldn't see it. Just like those large sailing ships in the harbor in Central America that the natives were unable to see because they had no reference point for anything bigger than a canoe. So, getting back to critical thinking, there's several elements of critical thinking that are absolutely vital. So the first principle is never assume anything. You all know what the word assume means when you break the pieces down. Ass out of you and me. Making an ass out of you and me. Assume. So start by letting go of assumptions. If you have something that you absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt is true, you can acknowledge that you have an understanding. Let's say gravity, for example, that gravity exists on planet Earth. Scientists say it does. You can check it out for yourself. It does seem like objects tend to fall back to Earth when you throw them up into the air. If you jump off a ledge, you hit the ground. You can measure the science. Yes, it's 10 meters per second squared, the acceleration of the fall, taking into account friction and other factors. So yeah, these are basic Newtonian laws which work in everyday life. So it's probably okay to accept some basic principles. The law of conservation of energy. If you assume the law of conservation of energy, things tend to work very well and are very easily predictable in the physical world. So yes, this doesn't necessarily mean that gravity is an absolute truth. What happens when you get out in space, far enough away from any celestial objects that their gravitational field no longer affects you? You float around. You are essentially experiencing no gravity. So gravity is not a universal truth, but it is a truth on Earth. When you're in the presence of a celestial body such as the Earth, you're going to experience gravity. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel and try to prove that gravity exists or doesn't exist. We're not going to go there. So yes, there will be a few assumptions made. 2 plus 2 equals 4. We call that a math fact. We all agree that 2 plus 2 is 4. We're not going to start deciding that 2 and 2 is 5 just because maybe it fits our equations better or it fits some narrative that we want to prove the existence of. Actually, if you wanted to prove the Earth was flat, you would have to use things like 2 plus 2 is 5 or equally false statements in order to prove your supposition. So, critical thinking does not mean you reinvent the wheel. It doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't mean you reject things that work in everyday life. It does mean you probe deeper. You explore, you investigate, you examine with an open mind. You say, okay, we know that there's gravity on Earth, we know there's electromagnetism, but here's some things we really don't know much about. Let's say we want to find out more about zero-point energy. That's a big hot topic these days. Zero-point energy. Let's investigate what is zero-point energy without having all kinds of preconceptions and assumptions about it. We know it pertains to the subatomic world, so we're going to get some powerful microscopes. We're going to pore over the manuals of people like Maxwell Planck and Einstein and Niels Bohr and many others who have studied the subatomic level of creation. And again, we're not going to assume that they all know everything about everything. They were researchers. They discovered things. Einstein discovered some incredible things that basically contradicted Newton, that basically put some of Newton's principles into question. And now there are quantum discoveries that are putting some of Einstein's theories into question, especially if it says theory behind something. A theory is not a fact, it is not a truth. It is something that works really, really well, and so we use it in everyday life. But just because it's a theory doesn't make it a fact or the truth about something. It's a useful observation about reality that is consistent, that follows a consistent pattern. So it's useful information, theories. But again, you have hypotheses, and then you have theories, and then you have facts, and then you have truth. So there are varying levels of certainty about the reality of that which you are exploring. So we don't want to stay purely in the realm of science when we talk about critical thinking. In this particular case, we want to talk about self-empowerment. And so how would we approach self-empowerment from a stance of critical thinking? Well, the first thing we're going to do is a lot of observation. We're going to, as we said earlier, define self, and we're going to define power. If you have a powerful self, you have to know what is the self and what is power. So you're going to come back to our definitions of self and power repeatedly, and then you're going to take a look at different manifestations of what we typically call power. For example, if I put some names out there, you probably would agree that certain of the names I put out there represent powerful people. We're going to let's use Tony Robbins. He's a motivational speaker. Almost everybody's heard of him. And he is typically what people would think of as a powerful person. Now, you could also pick a politician, let's say Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. And again, you have to be careful about your definition of power here. Does he truly manifest power, or is he merely exerting control and influence over a large number of people? So in order to answer that question, you've got to use critical thinking. Is Vladimir Putin truly a powerful person, or does he simply know how to project energy in a way which appears powerful? This is a rhetorical question. There's not an immediate answer to a question like that. So that could be your homework assignment, to do critical thinking on the statement or the question, is Vladimir Putin a powerful person? But let's look at Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker, because for all practical purposes, he seems to be able to manifest a great deal of success, energy, enlightenment, happiness, love, and admiration, respect, and many other qualities. So let's go ahead and make the assumption that, based on our definition of power, he seems to be manifesting a fairly high degree of power. So we're going to examine what is Tony Robbins doing that comes across as a powerful person to others. And those, as we said in one of the videos, if you go to an Anthony Robbins lecture and he charges you, say, $100 for 2 hours of talking, and there's 800 people in the auditorium, and you interview people as they're coming out of the auditorium after the 2 hours and ask them, do you feel like you got your money's worth? 90% of them or more are going to say yes, we feel it was money well spent, because they felt empowered being in the presence of Tony Robbins. So let's look at the possibility that a truly powerful person will facilitate the empowerment of others. Not try to make himself look good at the expense of others, or this one-sided admiration, oh, you're so great and I'm such a miserable schmuck. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a truly powerful person seeking to empower others. Why would he do that? Because he's not afraid that someone's going to take all his fame and fortune. No, he is secure within himself, and he's therefore going to want to share that with others because it's the right thing to do. It feels good. It feels like the right thing to share your true energies, your higher frequencies with others. And true power, as we've said before, involves higher frequencies. It involves the ability to integrate the lower and higher self. So a truly powerful person is enlightened, is loving, and is service-oriented, wants to empower others because he's not worried about his own well-being. His well-being is determined by God, and he knows that, or she. You can use male or female here. So a truly powerful person seeks to empower others. This is something that we can observe, we can investigate, we can examine every time we want to determine whether someone is truly powerful, whether a movement is powerful, whether it is effective in empowering people. So we're going to look at why are these people in this group empowered and the people in this group seem to be disempowered, giving all their energy to their guru or their leader, bowing down in front of their leader, and their lives are a mess, but their leader's got 3 yachts and 4 jet planes, but but the followers are struggling to come up with money for their everyday life. Maybe they gave all their money to their leader because their leader said that was the way to heaven or something like that. That is not a powerful person. That is a deceptive, manipulative person, a false teacher, false guru, whatever you want to call, cult leader. So you can examine all of this for yourself. I'm giving you some examples of things you may want to examine with critical thinking to say, okay, let's look at whether the followers of this person are being empowered as a result of the teachings of this person. That's a worthy subject to investigate, to go into and say, is this power being transmitted, being transferred to the students? We think that's a very valid question, one that deserves some critical analysis. So you interview people, you observe the things the organization has done, the people within the organization, what they have done, what kind of results they've gotten working with people. Maybe there is a main teacher of an organization, and then you have sub-teachers, or the teachers who trained with the main teacher, and maybe you have 3 or 4 tiers or levels of teachers in the organization. These teachers trained others to become teachers, and so on. So you go down through the layers of the organization and see, are the people truly being empowered as you work your way down through the organization? And if they are, that's a pretty good indication that you're talking about true power. And so then you're going to say, okay, this looks like a valid power structure. So let's go into it. Let's see what their secrets are. What are they doing that empowers people? How are they helping others boost their self-esteem, boost their self-image? So these are the kind of things you want to do if you're critical thinking. You want to be able to discern truth from falsehood. This is a major part of critical thinking. Put it to the test. Somebody makes an outrageous statement. You don't blindly reject it, and you don't blindly accept it. You go into it. You investigate it. You see if there is truth to what is being claimed. And it may take some research. It may take quite a bit of research, depending on what the issue is. Let's take a contemporary example. Let's talk about what is the deadliness of the COVID-19 virus, for example. Is it like a black plague, or is it slightly worse than the flu, or is it a total hoax? And let's go deep into that question. Let's investigate that question. Now, we're not going to actually take the time to do that, but we're going to use that as an example. So what are you going to do? You're going to talk to doctors, you're going to talk to nurses, you're going to talk to researchers. Yes, you'll talk to government officials. Yes, you'll talk to big pharmaceutical company executives, but you're not going to limit your research to those viewpoints, because they're likely to be biased. You're likely to not get an accurate picture of what's going on if you talk to those who have a vested interest. But you also don't want to exclude them either. You want to look at a broad range of viewpoints, and just because they have letters after their name or they claim to be experts does not necessarily mean they have the truth about the virus. So you're going to look at many, many different viewpoints when you're investigating, when you're researching something like, what is the mortality rate of the virus, the true mortality rate of the virus? What is the infection rate? Does it justify locking people in their homes? Does it justify wearing masks? And this is not something that's going to be answered in 20 minutes. This is a major research project. And fortunately, there are a lot of people researching it, so you have a lot of material to draw from. And if you do enough research, you can start to form an educated picture of what's going on with this virus. And you can start to understand perhaps why some people seem to be immune and others don't, and why some people are in horrible fear about it and other people act like it's nothing. So you would basically gather as much data as you can, and it helps to understand the psychology of other researchers. Are these people biased? Do they have some kind of company or organization that is sponsoring them, and they're afraid to break away from the party line, the party view, and so they're very reluctant to go outside the box. That's, again, pseudoscience. When your natural scientific curiosity that says, I want to find out what this is about, when that gets compromised because, oh my God, what if I find out that it's not what they say it is? Am I going to lose my funding? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be censored? You know, that sort of thing. Then you cave in to the expectations of your bosses and your authorities. Then you're no longer a scientist. You're a pseudoscientist. So when it comes to self-empowerment, same thing. We're going to investigate self-empowerment from a neutral point of view, from an open-minded point of view. What is self-empowerment? How is it achieved? And we'll examine people who seem to be achieving it, and we will follow perhaps their example and see where it leads, or we will at least work with some of their principles to see, oh, well, this principle seems to work really well. These people seem to be empowered as a result of doing this technique or this exercise. So let's try that technique or exercise. Let's find out more about that process, that method. And so this is essential in self-empowerment, that we forget about all the assumptions. We throw all the assumptions out the window, and we say, okay, let us go in with an open mind, gathering data, gathering wisdom from different sources, but doing so from a purely neutral point of view. If I don't know and I want to find out, here's some people who appear to be manifesting self-empowerment. Let's find out more about them. Let's observe what they're doing and why it's working or not working, as the case may be. So we hope you've enjoyed this segment, and in our next segment we're actually going to go into energetic communication. We're going to talk about creating from the heart and solar plexus rather than from the mind, and we're going to talk a little bit about the chakra system and the aura, because these are vital factors in determining your level of self-empowerment.